Welcome to Guide to IELTS. In this video, we'll first plan and then write an essay on this topic about zoos. Before we start the planning though, let's get a couple of concepts clear. Zoos are a place or an establishment where wild animals are kept, usually for display to the public. In zoos, animals are kept in cage or enclosures. However, zoos are different from wildlife sanctuaries and national parks where only those animals are kept which can no longer survive in the wild. And national parks and wildlife sanctuaries are protected natural habitats. Natural habitat of an organism, a plant or an animal is an area where they naturally live. So wildlife sanctuaries and national parks provide an environment for these animals which is close to their natural habitat. Let's start with the question now. Some people think that zoos are cruel and all the zoos should be closed. However, others think that zoos are useful to protect rare animals. Discuss both views and give your own opinion. As we always do, first step, read the question and understand it properly. There are two opinions mentioned here. First, zoos are cruel, so close them. Second, zoos are useful. So what it does mean is that we shouldn't close them. Another important point is that the question mentions rare animals. Now the term rare animals refers to animals which are uncommon. They are different from endangered animals or species. Endangered species are those which are under threat of extinction. Because of human activities such as poaching or deforestation, the numbers of these animals have reduced. Rare animals are under threat too, but because they have a small population, because they are limited to a certain region. So they are vulnerable because if there is any disaster in those regions, they could get extinct. Because the question type is discuss both views and give your own opinion, we need to talk about both sides and then conclude by mentioning which side we support. It is also correct to take the middle path. For example, we could write that both sides have valid arguments in their favor, because of which, in my opinion, zoos are important, but we need to ensure that the animals there are treated humanely. So in this example conclusion statement, I have conditionally agreed to the second opinion. Bottom line is your conclusion depends on what points you have made. Another example of conclusion is, if you have 2 points supporting the first opinion and 4 points for the second one, you could write, although there are a few reasons to support closing of zoos, the arguments for benefits of zoos are more. Therefore, in my opinion, zoos are helpful to the society and should remain open. I could just end here, or in this case, I could add a sentence. However, it should be ensured that the animals in the zoos are treated humanely. This is why it is crucial that you plan the essay. Planning helps you structure the essay properly and helps you figure out your conclusion. If your conclusion doesn't match the points you have made, it will amount to a lower band. The basic writing format or template that we'll follow is, first paragraph will have the introduction. This introduction can just be paraphrasing of the question, that is writing the question in different words, or it could have some kind of a general statement followed by mentioning the two opinions that are there in the question. After that, we'll write a statement that we're going to be discussing both the points in the essay. The next two paragraphs, that is the second and the third paragraphs, are the body paragraphs. In these paragraphs, we discuss the supporting points for the two opinions that we are given. We start the second paragraph with a topic sentence. That is a sentence that conveys which side we'll be talking about, followed by the supporting points using beginning words and phrases such as firstly or to begin with, followed by secondly, thirdly, or moreover, furthermore. When we start with the third paragraph, we start with a contrasting phrase such as on the other hand, followed by mentioning that we'll be talking about the other side now, and then supporting viewpoints of the same. Finally, the fourth paragraph is a conclusion which gives our opinion based on the points that we have made in the second and third paragraph. So as we always do when planning this type of question, we make a table so that there is no confusion about which side has more points. As I mentioned before, your conclusion depends on what points you have made. It doesn't have to be what your actual opinion is. We'll now start planning the essay. First, we'll list out the reasons why zoos are useful. First point, they are a safe place for animals, especially from poachers. We can give an example of rare and endangered species here, such as tigers and pandas. The second point can be about research. They are a good place where scientists can research animals. And the third point could be about edutainment. So edutainment means education and entertainment together. You can always choose to have two different points of this, one of education, one of entertainment. I've consciously decided not to do so here because I feel I already have enough points, so I can club these 2 points together. So the third point for benefits of zoos include edutainment. Under edutainment, I can mention that they are a great place for a family outing, for a school excursion. Also, through zoos, we can learn about animals. People, especially children, feel a certain affinity towards them, having seen them. And zoos are also a great place from which we can spread awareness about environmental issues, etc. Let's now start planning the other side, regarding cruelty towards animals in zoos and why they should be closed. One point on this side is that the animals are mistreated there. They are put in confined spaces, they are put in cages. Examples can be given of any animals which live in forests, which live in open spaces, such as tigers and monkeys. Now we can write a good essay just with these points, and we will be doing so. However, I'll also give you samples of better essays which use more points. What you need to understand is that you can make a good essay out of very limited points also. If you feel you would not be able to meet the required 250 word count, try writing some examples. Just make sure you're using variety of vocabulary when writing these points, when writing examples. So if I write an essay just using this, my essay would be in favor of the viewpoint which says zoos are useful. I may write in the end that we should strive to provide animals with bigger spaces. Let's look at a couple of other points that we have against zoos. One is that when we say zoos are a great place for entertainment, it is ethically wrong. Hampering the freedom of any living organism for entertainment, for amusement, cannot be justified morally. Another point, the animals which are raised in captivity, which are bred in captivity, usually can never be released in the wild. An example of chimpanzees can be given. Chimpanzees which are raised in zoos, which are used for research and for studies, actually cannot survive in the wild. Now, if I write an essay using all these points, I would conclude by saying that zoos need to be closed. There is one more way of handling this essay. We use all these points, we write the conclusion that zoos should be closed, but then we give other alternatives for how we can provide education regarding animals using audiovisual media, how we can have wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, for conservation of animals, for studies of animals. Now this last part is not really asked in the question, so we'll just include it in the conclusion. Now before we start the actual writing, between planning and writing, you should just give yourself maybe a minute or so to think about what words and synonyms you would need when writing this question. Think of any specific phrases that come to your mind so as to avoid repetition of words and phrases in the writing. Now in this case, for a word like cruel, I could write mistreatment. I could just change the word from cruel to cruelty. For closed, I could write shut down. Useful, have benefits, protect, conserve. Zoos is one word for which we do not have any perfect synonym. We do have words like wildlife conservatories or wildlife parks, but they are not strictly only for zoos. These words can be used for national parks and wildlife sanctuaries also. So we'll use these words carefully. Another interesting word that we can use is menagerie. This is a word that is used for any place where animals are kept for exhibition. But again, this is not a word which is used only for zoos. Even for other places such as a circus where animals are there to perform, this word can be used. So I won't be using these words in the introduction because that is only about zoos. But later when I write about maybe zoos being for entertainment, I could use the word menagerie, which would include zoos and other such places. We start with the first paragraph, the introduction. First, a general statement. Visit to a zoo is part of fond childhood memories of almost everyone. Yet, it has become a contentious subject in recent years whether zoos serve an overall positive purpose. There are a few other introductory paragraphs that I've written. They are all on your screen. What you need to notice is that in each of them, I have ensured that my general statement is connected to the second statement, which is a paraphrasing of the question. Another way to write an introductory paragraph is to start with a question. Should zoos be encouraged because they serve a useful purpose, or should they be shut down because animals in zoos are treated inhumanely? This has become a contentious subject in recent times which deserves serious thought and discussion. Followed by the introduction, in the first paragraph itself, we can write a statement like, since there seem to be valid supporting arguments for both perspectives, this essay will discuss them and reach a logical conclusion based on the presented line of reasoning. Now we start with the second paragraph. The first sentence would be the topic sentence which mentions which viewpoint we'll be discussing in this paragraph. Once again, there are multiple ways we could write the topic sentence. A few of them are on your screen. One such topic sentence is, the useful benefits of zoos have long been known. Now we start listing out the different points that we have. The first point about zoos being a safe place. Firstly, these establishments provide a safe place for wild animals from poachers and other risks. This is especially crucial for rare and endangered species. For example, tigers and pandas are kept in different zoos across the globe, because of which their numbers have grown manifold over the years. The second point, for them being a location for researchers. Secondly, these zoological parks are needed by researchers and scientists to study animals. The third and the last point about this opinion. Lastly, menageries such as zoos are ideal location for edutainment. We could just have written, lastly, zoos are an ideal location for edutainment. But as we have discussed, this is an interesting word we can incorporate if we know it. Now we'll go on to list out how zoos help in edutainment. First we'll talk about entertainment and then about the education that we can get from it. Notice the different connectors we are using. First we use that is to say, then we'll use as a result. That is to say, these establishments are not only an ideal source of entertainment for people of all age groups, but they are also a way to impart education to children regarding animals. As a result of visit to such places, children may feel an affinity towards animals. What is more, zoos are a brilliant means of creating awareness about environmental issues. Notice that in one place, instead of repeating the word zoos, I've written such places. The third and fourth paragraph we'll try to write in different ways as we have discussed during the planning. If we are choosing to write a lot of points in the third paragraph, or if we are choosing to write a conclusion which is more detailed by giving alternatives, we can make the second paragraph a little concise by avoiding the example that we have written. Let's now write the third paragraph where we write just one point to support the viewpoint which asks for closure of zoos. We'll start with a contrasting phrase, on the other hand. On the other hand, those who oppose zoos and want them to be closed assert that animals are not treated well in the zoos. We use phrases like those who support this viewpoint or it is asserted by some people when we are trying to convey that this is not my opinion but opinion of other people. Because in this case, I'm planning to write a strong essay which favors the benefits of zoos, I'm using this phrase. Now I'll go on to explain how animals are not treated well. These animals are caged in confined spaces. The cages and enclosures are tiny compared to their natural habitats. For instance, a tiger, which is one of the fastest animals, is sometimes kept in small cages. Similarly, monkeys which can jump from one tree to another in seconds are at times confined to a small area with just 2 to 3 trees. And we can conclude this essay with, in conclusion, my opinion is that zoos have many benefits which have been proven over the years and they should certainly not be closed. We should, however, ensure that the animals in zoos have larger spaces where they can move about. Let's now write the third paragraph in another way, where we write strongly against zoos. On the other hand, it is necessary to accept that no creature should be treated as if it is for entertainment of humankind. Hence, the treatment of wild animals in zoos has to be considered as brutal as their freedom is hampered there. What is worse, the animals bred in captivity are incapable of adapting to the wild environment and thus can never be released to the wild. For instance, if a chimpanzee is born in a zoo environment, it would never be able to live in a forest. The chimpanzee would not know how to live with other wild animals or even find food for itself. Now in this case, because I have written stronger points and more points against than in favor, my conclusion would be, in conclusion, although it seems that there are quite a few positives of zoos, I strongly believe they are an atrocity and closing them is the only ethical recourse. We use the word recourse when we are trying to convey that this is the only option to solve a difficult situation. Now the last possibility that we had discussed, where we mention a few alternatives to zoos in the conclusion. If I'm planning to do that, in all probability, I may skip the examples that I've given in the second and third paragraph. So in that case, my conclusion would start the same way as the second sample by saying, in conclusion, although it seems that there are quite a few positives of zoos, I strongly believe they are an atrocity and closing them is the only ethical recourse. As far as education is concerned, we now have a wide range of audiovisual media for this purpose. A practical example of this is the fact that no child has ever seen a dinosaur, but through movies, documentaries, animations and museums, they are very familiar with these extinct creatures. Similarly, for research and conservation purposes, wildlife sanctuaries and national parks should be encouraged, where the focus is the well-being of the animals and not the amusement of human visitors. You can find these essays and more on our website guide2ielts.com. What always needs to be kept in mind is that there is no one single way to answer a question. What I'm trying to say here is that we need to ensure that we answer exactly what is asked. And it is not necessary to have a lot of points to do so. If you found this video useful, do like it, share it with others, comment, and finally, most importantly, subscribe to our channel. All the very best.